Hey friends, here at Free Your Mac, sometimes we're going to talk about iPhone news as well, especially when it touches upon Apple's increasingly tight control over hardware and software in the name of so-called ecosystem reliability. And to be fair, Apple does have decades of evidence showing that closed systems can deliver smoother device integration along with strong security and privacy. That part is real. But at the same time, some of Apple's more disruptive changes feel less like genuine innovation and more like profit engineering. Changes that remove user choice and then reframe that removal as progress. A classic example, the iPhone 7's courageous removal of the headphone jack. Courage. It was marketed as a move towards cleaner lines and better design, while conveniently clearing the runway for wireless AirPods, a product line that now generates enough revenue to stand alone as a Fortune 500 company. What's especially telling is that many people remember the iPhone 7 as being more sleek than the iPhone 6, even though it was actually slightly thicker and heavier. This gap between perception and reality highlights a familiar Apple pattern. Change is rarely forced in obvious ways. Instead, features are removed with the distraction of new features, or with an air of sophistication, or in some cases, removed quietly, leaving users wondering if the change might just be temporary. And then changes fade from memory until what once felt optional becomes the new normal. And that brings us to Apple's latest and unadvertised shift in iPhone policy with the release of iOS 26.2, and with a situation that I believe many will agree deserves the title of UpdateGate. Because with this quiet incremental update within the iOS 26 upgrade, Apple introduced a regressive protocol that places many pre-iPhone 17 users in a difficult position, effectively forcing those running iOS 18 or older to choose between stability or security. And you really can't have both, because with early release iOS version upgrades like 26.2, many users routinely report sometimes major issues of stability. And yet Apple has now taken away the choice to remain on the older iOS and still receive security updates. Yep, Apple is up to the removal tricks again, and in this case removing choice. And it seems to be the reason could be to force more people to upgrade their iOS, as recent statistics show that many iPhone users are sitting out or even boycotting the new iOS upgrade featuring liquid glass, and for a variety of good reasons. So let's back up a bit for context. After iOS 18, Apple changed its naming scheme to synchronize OS versions and iOS versions with calendar years, like car models. And so late 2025 brought us iOS 26. And with iOS 26.0 and 26.1 up until mid-December, Apple still allowed a familiar, sensible option in the software update settings. If you were on iOS 18 and didn't want to risk upgrading to a brand new OS, it was comforting to see two options. Take the newer iOS, or you could stay put and still receive security updates through parallel releases to iOS 18. And for those with otherwise smooth running systems, this meant stability, no pressure, the way things had been working for years with consistency. But with the rollout of iOS 26.2, that option to update the older iOS disappeared. And with iOS 26 still in its infancy, lacking stability, and iOS 18 no longer offering updates for security, now you have to choose between the relative temporary stability of sitting still but no longer getting security updates and eventually losing app compatibilities, or choose the only way now to still get essential security updates by choosing the iOS 26.2 upgrade and the unpredictability that comes with any new OS. And why would Apple force this choice upon us? Are they that out of touch with their actual user experience that they cannot grasp the potential stress or inconvenience or expense? Or is it just in their DNA to overstep. Users of older iPhones unable to run iOS 26 were given one last security update to version 18.7.3 before being kicked to the curb. But if your older iPhone is, according to Apple, capable of running iOS 26, well, Apple just rug pulled any last chance ability for you to upgrade your device to the most secure and sensible, stable version of iOS 18. And this alone is enough good reason to call out and exclaim, UpdateGate, 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 blocking your way. And for those still running a really old iOS 16 or 17 who might have been biding their time, getting ready for some intermediate new features or compatibilities that came with an iOS 18 that finally seemed fully stable and safe enough to upgrade, well, they just got that freedom of choice taken away as well with no warning. Now,
you better take a look at this.
For people who bought new iPhone 17 models that shipped with iOS 26, early bugs are an expected part of the early adopter experience. Those issues are softened by faster hardware. But for users of devices that ran perfectly well on iOS 16, 17, or 18, the iOS 26 risk is very different. If a critical app breaks, or battery life tanks, or performance degrades, there's no rollback. And if that phone is essential to your work or travel, those bugs aren't minor annoyances, they're real costs of your time and money, and sanity. For power users who depend on their phones 24/7, this predicament is as absurd as an airline requiring an upgrade be performed on your aircraft mid-flight. Not because something broke, but because if you value safety, waiting to upgrade is no longer allowed. Which sounds like Apple being Apple circa 2026 with a little authoritarian twist. So fasten your seatbelts and brace yourself for impact and get ready for the implications, the bugs, the security threats brought about by UpdateGate. To understand how we got here, we need to look back. In 2017, Apple was caught secretly slowing down older iPhones through an iOS update with what became known as the BatteryGate scandal, since Apple later claimed the throttling of older phones was intended to protect aging batteries. But the real offense wasn't the code, it was the lack of disclosure and user choice. Updates often happen silently, overnight, after which many users noticed dramatic performance drops. Apparently, even Apple Store employees were kept in the dark, leading to confusion, unnecessary repairs, or people simply giving up and buying new phones. BatteryGate could have been avoidable, or even a heroic win if Apple had been forthcoming about the issue. Unfortunately, Apple's minimalist design philosophy extends to their minimalist technical communications as well. So once the truth emerged through the media, it wasn't hard for the public to envision a software-driven corporate conspiracy to drive more sales of new iPhones, and trust in Apple collapsed. After lawsuits, settlements, and regulatory scrutiny, Apple changed course. One result was the introduction of dual-track iOS updates, allowing users to stay on older, stable versions while receiving security patches. This wasn't generosity, it was damage control. And because iOS updates are irreversible, it was an overdue concession to consumer rights. From iOS 14 through iOS 18, Apple normalized the dual-track model, restoring at least a fragile sense of user control. Now, with iOS 26.2, Apple appears to be walking that back.
For all iPhones capable of running iOS 26, including models as old as the iPhone 11, which Apple just labeled as vintage a couple weeks ago, by the way, continuing to receive security updates now requires accepting the latest OS upgrade.
To be clear, iOS 26.2 is not BatteryGate 2.0. Apple isn't secretly throttling performance, but in some ways, UpdateGate is worse. Even if you're not personally experiencing any issues with your iPhone, and if so, good for you. For every few of you, there's at least one who is. And for every few of those, at least one of them might have been spared if they could have remained on iOS 18 with security. And that equals millions of users with unnecessary issues. And it's all because of a corporation removing options we had come to depend upon, removing our choice. But not our voice. UpdateGate, UpdateGate. Indeed, Apple appears to be introducing, or at least testing out, a new unspoken ecosystem rule here, and expecting users to be complicit. Perhaps banking on everybody having forgotten all about BatteryGate. The motive isn't mysterious. Consolidating platforms, cutting support costs, and accelerating product cycles, the kind of synergy that Wall Street loves. But major OS upgrades carry real risk. Many experienced users intentionally wait for versions like 26.4, 0.5, or 0.6, not out of stubbornness, but out of experience. They don't want their currently reliable device bogged down by visual effects like liquid glass. And how quickly might we forget those who suffered through early iOS 18, lured in by the promise of Apple Intelligence and iOS upgrade, which didn't even come close to stability until version 18.4. Yes, supporting multiple update tracks costs Apple real resources, but security and stability are supposed to be core features of Apple's premium ecosystem, the justification for a $1,000 phone. Is Apple really so short of engineers that this comes down to simple cost cutting, or is it control? Whatever the reason, the obvious outcome is fewer choices for users, lower costs for Apple, and a system optimized for shareholders, not reliability. But a reasonable solution exists. Re-enable dual-track updates for all pre-iPhone 17 users, keeping iOS 18 upgrades and security patches available until iOS 26 reaches maturity, not 26.2. And when iOS 27 is released, keep incremental security updates available until version 27 reaches the same. Lacking this, let the UpdateGate memes begin.
Send them on out. You know who you are.
And please follow Free Your Mac for more freedom-oriented Apple updates. Next episode, we'll break down exactly how much it might cost Apple annually to maintain dual-track updates, and you might be shocked at how small that number is compared to what users are being asked to sacrifice. I'll also share my own experience upgrading from iPhone 13 to 17 and from iOS 17 to 18 to 26, including the bugs, breakdowns, and actual sleep disruptions. I mean, the flurry of unsanctioned 3 a.m. Apple Watch tones and haptic notifications that followed during sleep mode, which has got to be the most interactive ecosystem bug I've ever experienced. So let's be clear about what UpdateGate really represents. This isn't about protecting your security. It certainly seems to be about profit maximization along with control of the user base, specifically Apple's sophisticated stylistic Stockholm Syndrome form of control, softened, normalized, and in this case, enforced by removing the simple freedom to wait. If you're not okay with that, please help us draw attention to UpdateGate and similar situations on the Mac. And thanks for listening to this Free Your iPhone episode here on Free Your Mac. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to my new channel, please, because there's so much more to come. I am EKG Ek, Electro Greg, Free Your Mac, and your mind will follow. Over and out.